There's a statement in the Torah, in the Bible, in the description of creation. On the first day, God created light. On the second day, God created the heavens. On the third day, God created vegetation, trees, and so on. On the fourth day, on the sixth day, God created man. Then God said, "It is not good with man alone. I will create him a helpmate." And God created a woman. Now the question, two questions actually. Question number one, God is doing very well. First day was successful. Second day was successful. Now it's the sixth day. It's going well. He creates a man. And then he says, it's not good for a man to be alone. I'll create a woman. Go right ahead. Why do you have to make that statement? You created a man. It's not enough, so create a woman. Why all of a sudden does God have to say, the reason I'm creating a woman is because it's, just go ahead and do what you have to do. You're on a roll, do it. It almost sounds like God is excusing himself. Question number two. God said it is not good to be alone. It's not? Is that true? It's not good to be alone? If it's not good to be alone, why do you always hear people saying, leave me alone? Now, obviously, if you're incapable, if you can't do your own laundry, if you can't cook an egg,
thank you, that's right,
then you have a problem. But the problem is not that you're alone. The problem is that you're not capable. But if somebody were perfectly capable, self-sufficient, would it be bad to be alone? Or would that be perfect? Don't have to answer to anyone. You're not dependent on anyone. You're perfect.
Except we're meant to connect as human beings.
For what?
For pleasure.
Give me one good reason.
For building, for why are we meant to connect? I think we, as a human need, we have a need for connection, for community, that we see that everywhere, to feel at home, to feel like we have support.
True. At the same time, we want to be left alone.
There has to be a balance between those two things.
So here's what the Kabbalah says. Kabbalist.
Of course, go ahead.
Actually, you're a professional therapist. I'm an amateur Kabbalist. So, what the Kabbalist says is that God said it is not good for man to be alone, and by saying it, he made it that way. Just like he said, let there be light, there was light. God said it's not good to be alone, and it became not good to be alone. In simple language, human conditions would dictate that alone is perfect. But God says, not good. It's a divine instinct in the human being to not be content with oneself. And to make it even more dramatic, the Kabbalah says that when God said it is not good for man to be alone, he was describing himself. So he was saying, I am creating the world because alone is not good, even if you're God, meaning totally perfect. So God is saying, even when you're absolutely perfect, just yourself should not be alone, should not be enough for you. So our need for company, our need for connection is more than human. Which means that even when you're a perfect human being, it's still not enough. For some godly reason. Because we're created in God's image. He's not enough for himself, and he made it that way in us as well. That even when I'm perfect, it's not enough to be just me. There's something really beautiful about that, I think.
There is. Well, I think if you look at just today's modern living, people have to find that balance, because even within a relationship, I think one of the fundamental parts of being in a healthy relationship is also learning to be alone within the relationship, like having your space. Like you have to negotiate your aloneness or yourself. And this is where we may differ, is I don't believe you become one, and I think you need to be two wholes that come together. So the wholeness of each person, that individuality, is necessary in order to have sustained passion even throughout a relationship. Separateness brings the togetherness. Does that make sense?
No, but you're right.
Okay.
Separateness brings togetherness. Yeah, it's a puzzle. But yes, see, God gave us freedom of choice. Because if we didn't have freedom of choice, meaning if we couldn't disagree or reject him, then our existence would not solve the problem. He doesn't want to be alone, but if we agree with everything he says, then he's still alone. The only time you're not alone is when you're arguing. When you disagree with your spouse, now you know you're not alone. There's another opinion in the house.
Which is important.
And you have to love that. So yes, you have to be two separate people in order to become one.
To share, to not become one, in my books, not become one, but it's a Venn diagram. So you're sharing that the core is shared between the two of you, but that individuality, that differentiation is really necessary. And I find that couples who get very enmeshed in the relationship, you end up finding that one person completely sacrifices for the other or lives for the other person and turns around the other person, forgetting who they are, forgetting their separateness. And this creates oftentimes toxic environments. They're found in abusive relationships and things like that.
I think you'll agree that once you've been married for 50 years,
not there yet.
The couple does tend to become pretty much merged.
You merge on many ways.
Yeah.
But again, there's still an individuality. I can feel merged with my partner on so many levels, but I have my own life. Like I have my own interests. You're traveling the world. You're not. Your wife doesn't necessarily follow you everywhere you go. You have a separateness, a separate identity, but there's still that merging on so many other levels. That's what I'm talking about. It's not being completely separate, but having some of that.
I agree. There has to be me who can't live without you. If there's no me, then who's merging?
You. Right.
So even merging means you have to be.
Well, this is where the concept, I think, of self-love also comes in, love and really self-care, which we're hearing a lot about now in like pop psychology, and we're talking about mindfulness, and we're talking about all these things. But as much cliche as it sounds, that you have to love thyself so that you can love someone else or someone else can love you, I think there's something to be said about that. That otherwise, what I end up seeing is people who don't really value themselves, who end up with partners that don't value them. And then this is how the cycle of dysfunction continues, and this is how we end up with so many divorces, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of work to be done just societally in terms of even the way we raise children and how we treat people and learning about kindness and compassion in the world, that we still have a lot of work to do, because I'm seeing a hell of a lot of these kinds of unions that are simply destructive because we haven't learned to love thyself. And which isn't narcissistic or selfish, or, a lot of people who don't, or who sacrifice themselves for others will say, I feel very selfish if I do something for myself, or if I put myself before my children. But if you can't be strong, it's going to be hard for you to be there for everybody else, for your spouse, for your children, etc. So this is one of the things I talk about in one of the TED Talks that I did, is the priorities. You have to look at it. It's the self, it's the couple, and it's the children. Everybody puts the children and the couple at the bottom, or the self at the very bottom. But that's not sustainable over time. What happens 25 years in and the kids are no longer there? How many times do I have women who come into my office who tell me, I don't know who I am. I feel like I don't know who I am. I'm no longer mothering. So what is my role in all of this? And the distance with the couple, because they don't know who their partner is either. There's been such neglect that I don't know who you are. Now we have to relearn how to be a couple again, how we were pre-kids. So now we have to go back 25 years. Hopefully you make it that far to be able to do that, because those years can be the best years.
Yeah. Halacha goes into extreme detail on the nature of man-woman relationships, marriages, family, children, behavior, sex, everything. Does it not cover the type of thing that Dr. Laurie is talking about now, insofar as the psychological, emotional aspects and the small details of losing the relationship and bringing it back again? Or does it basically tell us that if you follow the halacha, you'll be in good shape with your relationship?
Yeah.
Okay.
The halacha is talking about healthy couples and how to maintain a healthy relationship. When there is disturbances, like childhood traumas or whatever, for that you go to a doctor. The Torah is not therapeutic. It's a healthy way of life if you don't mess up. So I think that this attitude, we are here for our children, completely devoted to the children, it used to work because people used to be healthy. So they came into the relationship healthy, ready to devote themselves to their children. But today, I don't know for how long, for the last 50 years maybe, unhealthy people are coming into relationships. So we need to do a little repair. You got to go back and undo the damage. But here's the assumption. Every human being loves himself by nature. Sometimes you hate yourself because you love yourself. I don't know what that means. Sounds good, no? Because you're so close to yourself, everything about you becomes exaggerated, and I'm the worst person in the world, and I can't do anything right, and everybody hates me. You're not that important. Knock it off. So it's all coming from maybe not self-love, but self-preciousness. I was talking to this woman who said, I'm suicidal. I don't care about life. I don't want to live anymore. I said, did you roll out of bed last night while you were sleeping? She says, no. I said, how come? Even when you're sleeping, you're protecting yourself. Don't tell me you don't love yourself. Obviously, the love is a little twisted. I love myself, so I'm going to kill myself. Something like that. So the Torah is saying, you know how you love yourself? Can you give some of that love to someone else? Don't keep it all for yourself. But there are people, psychologically speaking, who you can't make that assumption. You don't love yourself in a healthy way. So don't give that to somebody else.
That's the problem. That's exactly.
You've got an unhealthy self-love, keep it. Don't inflict it on someone else. But we assume you don't need to learn to love yourself. Of course you love yourself, but love yourself healthy. not twisted.
But we learn that through these experiences, especially in childhood, because we do come on earth, if we were pure, we would be loving ourselves because everybody around us would be loving themselves and then therefore sharing their love. And
it's natural.
Wouldn't it be wonderful if everybody loved everybody? Mm-hmm. It would be great. But unfortunately, because it gets broken at such a young age, that there is a learning of not loving oneself, because you need to also feel the love of someone else to feel like you're worthy of that love.
You do love yourself, but it's twisted.
It gets twisted.
It's a toxic love, not an absence of love.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, well, wow. I guess so. I mean, it's a twisted form, but people would say, I think those same people would say, I hate myself. They don't, yes. You know, it wouldn't be that I love myself.
Yeah, but that's their inverted. Like somebody said, my life is so meaningless, so meaningless, I'm going to kill myself. I said, no. Your life is totally meaningless. You don't need to kill yourself.
I'm not sure you'd make such a great therapist, but okay.
Yeah, if I had a license, I would lose it right there.
Yes,
right.
I'm just thinking.
But, you know, hypothetically speaking, what is this argument? My life is so meaningless, I have to end it. No, if it's so meaningless, just let it go on. No, can't. Can't. It's too painful. Which means you are feeling some compassion for yourself. You don't want this pain. So you're protecting yourself, trying to escape the pain. That can be a positive motivation. Doesn't have to lead to suicide.
No, but in our society, unfortunately, it leads to drug abuse and alcoholism and sexual addiction. So it's anything that numbs that pain, that psychic pain, is used. So it's going to be very hard to access the love you have for oneself when you keep destroying yourself. The vessel of love.
In the name of love.
In the name of love, yeah.
Okay, one other Kabbalistic concept. The world was created out of nothing. It's a big principle in the Kabbalah. All things came from no thing. What is came from what isn't, from what is not. Now, why is that interesting? Because if we came from nothing, then we have two sides to ourselves. There's the me that is, because I was created, and then there's the me that is not, because I was once nothing. That's where I have the ability to rise above myself. The ability to have true empathy, to really feel another person's pain, and not for my own purposes. Not because, you know, if you were healthier, I'd be healthier. If you were happy, you'd make me happy. No. True, altruistic empathy for another person's pain or another person's joy. How do I get past myself with my self-interest, my self-fascination? It's because that fact that I was once not enables me to get past what I am. I don't have to be stuck in myself. I have the option of moving beyond myself. And I think that that's the key to intimacy. Intimacy comes from that part of me that doesn't have to be me. That's why I can really connect to somebody else. And if two people can both get beyond their surface tension, then they can really become joined, become a we, an us. And then divorce would be a horrifying thought, like an amputation. Mm-hmm. And I think our grandparents had that. Mm-hmm.
If it's intimate, we'll continue on this intimacy talk, but I like to break down the word intimacy into me, see. You have to let somebody into that deeper part of yourself in order to connect. I was just telling the rabbi earlier, I was seeing a couple tonight, and they've been together 3 years, they've been living together for a year, and they're bickering, and it's just horrible to watch them. And I knew something was underlying in all this. And then the boyfriend suddenly says, because I was saying, something is triggering you. What is it? Let's get to it. And the boyfriend says, looks at her and goes, you know what? I don't even know you. Like 3 years together. I don't know anything about your history. I don't know anything about your past. I found that astounding. And so how can this couple build anything without, at the very least, that kind of intimacy and knowledge about each other? So they're always on the surface, just getting at each other only on the surface levels, things that are just annoying for each other, rather than really digging deep. And I called them on the fact that I said, I see zero compassion in this room. Where is the compassion for each other? Which means becoming aware, if you know about somebody's inside and you know about their struggles, or in this particular case, she had been abused by her father, and she had spent her whole life trying to get her father's love, which ultimately she was doing with this boyfriend, just trying to make him love her. But she kept picking these same guys that were incapable of loving her. So it just, this pattern that just did not click in neither of them. So, but now when they finally realized, oh, now I know what's being triggered on both sides, suddenly all the defenses were let go in the room. And the tears were flowing, and there was I heard him talk softly to her for the first time, and with some compassion for the first time. Why? Because in that moment, there was a level of intimacy that was created. So that depth is an absolute necessity to be able to have that.
See, that's psychological language. The same thing can be said in the Kabbalistic language, and that is, there are two sides to me. There's the side of me that has to be me. So I don't care what your history is. I'm just looking out for me.
Right.
But then there's a side to me that doesn't have to be me. Let's hear about you. So they're the two sides of the me that is and the me that doesn't have to be me. I can get into you. And that's the mystical.
But that's the key. The key to a healthy relationship is exactly to be able to do that. Yes, I can take for myself, but let me give to you now, and let me hear you, and let me be there for you. It doesn't always have to be something for me. And if two people are doing that very thing, you have success, because then you can work through anything at that point.
There's a beautiful story about a chassid in Russia was on his way to the yeshiva, and he walked past a house. There were two drunks sitting on the stoop, and one of them was crying. And the other one said to him, "Why are you crying?" And he said, "Because I don't have a friend in the world." He said, "What are you talking about? I'm your friend." And the guy said, and this only comes out when they're drunk.
Of course.
And the guy said, "How can you call yourself my friend? You don't even know why I'm crying."
There you go.
It's profound. You want to know why I'm crying. And I need to tell you because you don't hear me. So what kind of friend is this? But the ability to hear someone even when they're not talking, that's divine. That is godly. And we do have that godly capacity. But it's neglected. We get so busy with ourselves, we forget that we don't always have to be ourselves. We can be bigger. There's more to us than to be or not to be.
I think a lot of people in our society now strive to, they want to lead a purposeful life. Like a lot of people come to therapy because they feel they do not have a purpose, or they have lost that purpose, or they don't know how to make their life meaningful. And this often happens in midlife. Like, there was a study done that showed that you will be your most unhappy at age 47. And then it's up from there. So that, like, and this is across species, across genders, across cultures, countries. So I found that very interesting. What is it at 47, or in that age range, that creates such unhappiness? And I think it's at the time when you might ask yourself, what is my purpose?
And the reason you ask yourself that at 47 is because you figured, okay, so now I'm me.
Right.
But so what?
Right. I gave my kids already. Right. I've done all of that. Right. Now what? Until
47, you're trying to be you. And then you become you, even financially. At 47, if you haven't made your first million, you can pretty much say, okay, this is it. Now, what is it for?
Now what? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So why do we need to have meaning in life? What is the meaning of meaning? Now, Frankl came up with this brilliant insight, and it's true. If you find meaning, you can survive all sorts of... But why is that? Why does my life have to have meaning? Why can't it just be what it is? I am what I am, and that's all what I am. Like Popeye. So here again, Kabbalistic, why does a human being have to have meaning to his life? I mean, some people don't. Yeah. Just leave me alone and I'm
they're
fine.
Happy. Yeah, exactly.
You're here, you eat, you drink, you die, and they don't care.
That's true.
Because their kids care. Somewhere along the line, the caring is going to kick in. So, again, the Kabbalah says, we do not exist out of our own need. We don't need to exist. Now, that can be a very scary thought. I am here, I have a life, I've got problems, I've got issues, I work hard, I'm trying to be a mensch, and I don't have to do any of it. What for? The reason we look for reason is because our existence by itself has no reason. We don't have to be. I didn't have to be born. I didn't ask to be born. So I am here only for a reason, not my reason.
A reason.
Right. So because we are created that way, we're created out of a need, we feel it. It's like remembering that you have an appointment and you don't remember with whom. It would drive you crazy. I know I have to be somewhere, it's very important, but I don't remember where. So we live with that memory of a purpose, because we were created purposeful. So if I can't find the purpose, I feel like something is that needs to be there isn't there. So why do we need reason? Because for ourselves, life is not necessary. I don't need to be here. So I am here for a reason. It would really be helpful if I knew what that reason was. Otherwise, it drives me crazy. And that's what religion was supposed to answer. Every religion. Every religion is trying to explain why you're here and for what. They don't all do such a good job.
Just that the answer is so not clear for most of us. For some of us, it can be. Because I have these are existential questions that often people will have when they get to some kind of crisis in their life or what have you. And I'm thinking of one woman who said, well, I didn't have children, and I didn't have the chance to marry, and I didn't have much of a career, and yet she's the kindest human being that I've ever met. And I said, your kindness is like a pebble. That pebble, that tiny little pebble, has a ripple effect, but you can't see the ripples all the way there. You have no clue what your effect on that one person may have repercussions for centuries to come. You don't know that. So sometimes we don't see our meaning, but we need to believe that there is meaning. And if we behave in such a way as to be kind and compassionate and be good people, good human beings, that pebble will have that effect.
Very wise. I was talking to a person who just had a stroke, very active all his life, and now all of a sudden he's in a wheelchair. He says, I'm useless. I've become a useless being. But his entire family rallied around him. All his friends, all his neighbors, they're all there trying to take care of him, trying to help him. I said, you're having a bigger effect now after the stroke than before. No, you're not running around, but look at the effect you're having on all these people. You're bringing out all the goodness in them.
Right.
That is meaningful. Right. And you may assume, religiously speaking, you may assume that is the purpose that God now has for you. Not to run around and make yourself better, but bring out the goodness in others. Which is what a teacher is supposed to do, what a rabbi is supposed to do, what a therapist is supposed to do. Now you're doing it sitting in a wheelchair, which is amazing. And that's more effective than all the rabbis and all that. So, you look around and you see what circumstances you find yourself in. It's not an accident. You're there because that's where God needs you the most. A very powerful example is when one spouse becomes observant or religious and the other one doesn't. So the religious one, of course, feels very righteous. If I'm religious, then you have to be too. Yeah, well, no one told you that you have to be. You became because you found inspiration. But now you're expecting your spouse to become religious because you are. That's not inspiration. Right? So this one guy says, I think I'm going to divorce my wife because she just doesn't want to be religious. I said, how old were you when you found your inspiration? Something happened to inspire you. You weren't religious all your life. It happened 2 years ago. 2 years ago, you were married. He says, yes. I said, can you take a hint? God didn't inspire you when you were single. He gave you the inspiration while you're married to your wife. Obviously, he needs you to observe the mitzvahs as a married man married to this woman. If you divorce her, God doesn't need you anymore. You blew it. And besides, you want to become more observant, and the first thing you do is stop doing the one mitzvah you are doing by being married. You're going backwards. So this is really, if you find your inspiration at a certain point in life, it's not late. You're not a late bloomer. It's exactly when it was supposed to happen because God needs you in that circumstance. If you're not in that circumstance, then this is not your purpose. So find the purpose where you are, because you're there for a purpose. That's called a meaningful.
I'm listening to you talk and I'm thinking of a non-religious example, exactly what you just described. I just replaced religious with vegan.
That's a religion.
So 3 years ago, I became a vegan. And of course, as any new vegan, I did all the research and I'm reading all this stuff. So yes, I was a little preachy to my husband, and he was making fun of me. And, oh, do you want a plate of sawdust for dinner tonight? And, how much lettuce did you eat today? Anyway, long and short of it is, a couple of weeks ago, and then I just gave up. I didn't try to convert him. I just went about my own thing, and that was it.
You're so tolerant.
I know, eh? And 2 weeks ago, he comes home from the doctor's office, and he says, "Sit down. Now I'm going to tell you something, but you can't. I don't want you to say anything, and I don't want you to, whatever." And he told me, "I have decided to go plant-based." I just fell off my chair. But it's the same. He came to the inspiration on his own, and it wasn't with me pushing it. But I hope I had some role in inspiring him to do it, of course. But
of course, now he's going to be much more vegan than you, because
that's fine. He can cook now all he wants for me. It works.
Anyone wants to ask a verbal question or to write in a question, more than welcome to do so. Sorry.
Yeah.
No? Okay, let's go back to this loneliness thing, because it's a real crisis, I think. People get sick with all sorts of stuff because of loneliness. It weakens your immune system. And there's that famous line from The Piano Man. Anybody know The Piano Man?
Yeah.
Billy Joel? I don't know if he appreciated how brilliant the line is, but they're sharing a drink they call loneliness, but it's better than drinking alone. That's a mouthful. Loneliness is a problem because you want company, you want someone to talk to, you want someone to hear you. It's not nearly as devastating as aloneness. Because loneliness you can share. You're feeling lonely? Go to a party. But what happens when you come home from the party? You're not lonely again. Now you're completely alone. So aloneness, like God said, it is not good to be alone. The aloneness has become a plague all over the world, at least in the Western world. Even married couples, as we were talking before, even married couples who are happily married, yet in a quiet moment, each of them will say they feel alone. And the first thing that marriage is supposed to change is that you're not alone anymore. Probably the main purpose for marriage. Not for children, but to not be alone. And it's interesting how God says, "Therefore should a man leave his mother and father, cleave to his wife, and become one." Why can't he cleave to his mother and become one? God forbid.
His mother has a partner already.
Yeah, exactly. You can't be one with your mother because she has a husband. At best, you're number 3. The only relationship in which you are literally the one is marriage. With your children, you're not one because they're number 3, hopefully. So the marriage, at the very least, minimum, has to take away the aloneness. When you're married, even if your spouse is overseas, you miss your spouse, but you are not alone. Well, you have someone to miss. So when married couples are saying they feel alone, there's got to be something wrong with the intimacy.
Right. The worst feeling, I think, for people in relationships is feeling lonely in the relationship. It's worse than being uncoupled or non-coupled. That loneliness that means that you cannot reach your partners. They're somewhere far away. Even though you can see them, you can't reach them. And that feeling is the opposite of intimacy.
So where did the intimacy go? It can't be that this has always been the case, or we would all be insane. More insane. Our grandparents had intimacy, I think.
Or different expectations. I think we have different expectations of what intimacy is, of what love is. I really think that because of the kind of society we live in, with so much coming at us as to what it should be, which is, of course, a fantasy of all of this that we swallow from the day we're born, that it sets us up for a lot of failure. Because we're living a lot of these things that we take as truths are actual fantasy. All I have to do is look at the influence of, pornography in young people. It's the same thing. It's the fantasy, and then I see all kinds of issues with that. Fast forward into adulthood, because the expectations are completely unrealistic. But we also have the equivalent of fairy tales and Disney characters, and we grow up with Cinderella, and we expect that this is what marriage will look like, or this is what we should expect. So we have some adjustment to make in terms of what does it actually look like, and why do we have to work at it? It doesn't just happen because you said I do. So I think we don't teach what it is to develop intimacy. We don't teach what it is to be married.
So let me suggest one possibility. The fantasy that we're growing up with turns every relationship into a performance. Mm-hmm. You're supposed to do this. You're supposed to feel this. Mm-hmm. You're supposed to get that. That's pornography.
Yes. And you see that playing out in the bedrooms, never mind just in everything else.
Yeah. The pornography industry is sadly suffering because everybody is living pornography in their bedrooms. They don't need the magazines anymore. It has become mainstream.
Yes.
So now the pornography has to become weird, stranger than strange. So here's the shocking thing. The two things that are destroying intimacy, which should never have become things, is love and sex. When love becomes a thing, it's pornography. Human beings are not things. If your thing is love, you're married to the love. You're not married to the person. And the proof is, if the love fades, the relationship is over. There's nothing left. Which means you were married to the love, not to the person you're loving. So the love, instead of being a personal, interpersonal connection, has become the thing.
But this is why you hear people who say, I love you, but I'm not in love with you. They don't understand the concept of love, and love is action. Love is what you do. Love is far more than that feeling, because many times people say, I want what we had in the beginning. Well, that was lust, that wasn't love. So you can't get that back. It's not possible to get that part back, because it only happens one time. At the beginning of a relationship.
And it's not intimacy.
And it's not intimacy, it's lust. Exactly. So, but people have this distorted vision of that's the way it should always be. And so that's where we get into trouble. Instead of accepting the ebbs and flows of of life as a couple and of love.
So we were taught at a very young age in Chabad, being observant, doing a mitzvah, is not for the sake of getting to heaven. Because imagine, this is what we were told, imagine you say to God, I want to get to heaven. That's my goal. Gan Eden. I want to go to paradise. What will it take? Can you just let me in? No? I got to do this, and I got to do that, and I got to believe in you and worship you? Okay. But if you could just get me into heaven without all that. Like, what, do I really have to put up with all your shtick? Just let me into heaven, that's all I want. That is so blasphemous, right? Just get out of my way and let me into heaven. Now, apply that to a relationship. I want your love, not the rest of you. Don't give me your opinions and your mood. Just give me I'm marrying you for love. If you could just give me the love without the marriage and without your personality.
Without all your shtick, right?
Your shtick, that would be perfect.
Right.
But nothing's perfect in this world, so I'm going to have to marry you to get your love. But if the love goes out, I never married you. I don't have to put up with you. So, literally, I am married to the love, like in the religious context. I just want heaven. I don't want God. He's just standing at the door, not letting me in. Mm-hmm. But if I could get around... So, recently, a young couple came. They said, we are very much in love. We would like to get married. I said, too late. If you are already in love, what are you getting married for? All you want is love. Well, you have it. Don't mess it up. So, marriage means we already have the love. Now I want you. Because we can have the love without marriage. Yeah.
Keep talking about love. You haven't said anything about friendship. Doesn't it start with friendship? Isn't that the core of love before you even get to love?
It's a good question. What is the core of love? Who wrote the book of...
No, I want to know the friendship, basically.
I think friendship is it's an important component. You liking, when you have a friend, you like them, you like hanging around with them. Like if you think about what a friend is, it's friendship plus, right? But yes, ultimately, if you can't stand your partner,
You're going to get married, you're going to be together for so long, and you don't have friendship. I'm talking about love.
Well, you've got to want to hang around.
Just a little component.
No, it's not just a little component. Lust is a smaller component, way smaller component, of course. Friendship is far more important than lust. You're quite right. Yeah.
So when a man says, I really love my wife, we're not best friends. I don't like her, but I love her. Is he lying?
No, I don't think he's lying.
Is he deceiving himself?
But he may prefer to hang out with his buddies, but he loves his wife for other things that she provides.
There's the problem.
Is one person supposed to provide everything?
No.
Right.
But you're supposed to want that person without anything.
The presence of that, the being of that person.
Yes. Right? So if a man says, I love my wife, I don't like her. That means I love when she loves me. Other than that, I don't like her. That's terrible. That's why she's feeling alone.
Well, she doesn't feel the love. If he's only there because she loves him,
right,
and she doesn't feel he loves her, well, that's a big problem.
Yes. Because love has become the thing,
right,
and the people have been lost. So when love becomes a thing, it's no better than marrying for money, It's no better than wanting to get to heaven instead of having a relationship with God. It's pornographic. The second thing that is not supposed to be a thing, and that's destroying marriage, because intimacy is a non-thing. The second thing is sex. Sex used to be the end product of closeness, of commitment, of devotion, of respect, of removal of
all barriers, right?
barriers. But now sex has become the thing you do. That's pornography. It's a performance. You can be good at it. You're not good at it. This is terrible. Because in a bedroom, there should never be an it. I think last time we spoke, I mentioned this. If you ask your grandmother, what happens in the bedroom? Your grandmother would say, or maybe your great-grandmother, would say, nothing. Say, come on. Tell me, I'm 48. Tell me what goes on in the bedroom. Nothing. It's the right answer. It's a subtle way of conveying the right answer. In a bedroom, no thing goes on there. It's just them. It's just them. There's no thing. He's not a thing. She's not a thing. And they're with each other. Where did the thing come in?
There's no thing. There's vulnerability. And that is the intimacy. The problem that people have is because they can have it without vulnerability, which is amazing that people can do it, but they can't talk about it, for example. That's a showing of how it's like intimacy is not part of sex. There used to be a time when we said you want to get intimate, it meant having sex. Now they're two different things. And that's changed in the last 40 years or so, where the language even has changed. Intimacy is completely different from sex. So people have compartmentalized those things. But I think, and because of that, relationships get into trouble because they forget the reason why they need to be close. They forget that. And it isn't just about the frequency and about the orgasm and about all of that other stuff. It really is about that connection and that intimacy and that vulnerability.
Somebody said, supposedly an expert, somebody said, all the advice columns, all the magazines that tell you how to have better sex, how to increase your love, it's all wrong. We don't need more pleasure. Compared to our grandparents' generation, we have the most pleasure anyone has ever had in history. We don't need more pleasure from each other. We need more closeness.
Yes, 100%. I'm 100% in agreement. I think that is the problem in a lot of relationships that I see. In fact, one of the things that I do when I do see a couple like this is I forbid them to have sex. You are not allowed to have sex, but you are allowed to lie naked with each other. Or just lie together, or cuddle, or what have you. But you are not allowed to use that sex for that reason. And then the couple learns to rebuild that intimacy, the sensuality, all of that other stuff then besides just that pleasure.
And I think the magic of that, what do you mean I can't?
Yeah, I know.
I can't? Oh, that's starting to sound like intimacy.
Right.
If you can't, well, what is this, holy? Yeah. See, you're already healing. But I joke about this because the Torah says 2 weeks out of the month you can't touch each other. Therapeutic.
It works, actually. It works very well.
Yeah. Because intimacy is not a thing. The language, like you said. So are we going to do it?
It.
Do it? Or sometimes it gets worse. Did you do her?
Yes.
It really is, it's so disrespectful.
So vulgar.
So the grandmother says, a bedroom? No thing. No thing. So what's going on? Nothing's going on. They're there together with nothing between them. So intimacy is the removal of all things. That's intimacy. So even to the most secular, the most liberal interviewers, they say, so practically speaking, what can you do to improve your intimacy? Practically speaking, turn off the lights. Never be intimate with lights on. And turn off the music and the television. In fact, you shouldn't even have a television in your bedroom. It's always a problem. Move it to the living room. So what happens in the bedroom? You don't see anything. You don't hear anything. And you don't say anything. In a moment of intimacy, talk is forbidden. So you're saying nothing, hearing nothing, and seeing nothing. What's left?
Being.
Now you're there. You're there. So when a couple have been intimate, and afterwards, let's say the husband says, so how was it? First of all, your grandmother would get very upset. How was it? You brought an it into the bedroom? There was no it. Secondly, why are you asking? You were there. Or were you not there?
Good point.
You were not there. Sex, unlike intimacy, keeps you separate. It does not bond you. You have to compare. You got to ask. So
Right.
where were you?
Where were you?
You were into your thing, doing your thing, and she was doing her thing, and now you got to find out how it. So
we were talking, I was going to say off air, but before, about the concept of mindfulness now. So now we're taught, I'm sure you've all heard about mindfulness. We're seeing it in much more as a, I don't want to say pop psychology, but it actually works. There's studies that show that it works. But now we're looking at mindful sex and mindful loving and like being, and it is about being and being present in that moment and being present in the body and connecting, truly connecting with a partner. But you can't do that if your brain is somewhere else or focused just on this. So it's something that we're all learning now to do, and we all have to be more mindfully loving. In fact, tonight, if anybody wants to tune in on your way home or what have you, at 10 o'clock, I have a guest on who just wrote a book called Mindful Loving, and the concept is, she writes it beautifully, but we could just as easily have said it from a religious perspective. It really, they join.
And the title is so good, you don't have to read, you don't have to read the book.
Exactly.
It says it all.
It does say it all.
Yeah. So I think what we need to do in real life, back in the 60s, as a society, we decided to have free love. Mm-hmm. That love, making love, that vulgar expression, making love should be free. It was too complicated, it was too emotional, it had too much baggage, too many laws, too many taboos. Just relax.
That's free sex, not free love.
Yeah, and the fact that you have to call it love, why are you calling it love? Because you're embarrassed to say, I'm just having sex. So you pretty it up. So no, we're making love. Oh, beautiful. But it was free. Free meaning, what we understand today, free of mindfulness.
Right.
You don't have to be mindful. You just have to enjoy.
It was also the time of LSD and mushrooms. So There was no mindfulness there. It was being out of your body, not in your body.
And experimenting with everything. So now, to heal that, all these years later, we have to have non-free love. Love now has to have content. It's got to be mindful, it's got to be altruistic, it's got to be about a person, not about a thing. It's not that hard. Because by nature, it is much easier to be intimate than to perform. Intimacy is real to nature. This is what we naturally need each other for. When you turn it into a performance, it's not going to work.
But intimacy has become scarier than sex.
Yes, because we don't know what it is.
So we do sex instead of intimacy.
Yeah, and we're left with a hole in the heart.
Yep.
So we have to bring back the non-free love, expensive love.
Yeah.
And we have to bring back respect for the marriage. Marriage has also been depleted of all meaning. We love each other very much, so we get married. What does that mean? I don't know what that means. What are you getting married for? If you're marrying for love and you already have the love, what are you getting married for? And you said earlier today, we're told to get married. We get married. We don't even stop to think. Why? For what? What's so special about marriage? Why does it involve a religious ceremony? Why do you have to get to the church on time? Why does marriage involve a rabbi, a blessing, a broken glass? What is that? What is marriage? So I got to tell you this beautiful little story. I don't know, how much time do we have? You got to get back to your...
10 more minutes.
Yeah, 10 more minutes.
Okay.
I have to go.
Here's the story. I'm a teenager, and I have this teacher in Brooklyn who I adore. A brilliant, clear-minded, a pleasure to talk to him on any subject. So we're standing outside on the street, having a conversation. And as we're talking, a young couple come over, newlyweds. The wife says, "Rabbi, isn't it true that that you're not allowed to ladle soup out of a pot on Shabbos? Tell my husband, he doesn't know." The rabbi says, wait. What's the question again? She says, are you allowed to ladle soup out of a pot on Shabbos? Or is it considered labor? He says, like with a ladle? She says, yeah. He says, while the pot's on the fire? She says, yeah. On Shabbos? On Saturday? Yeah. He says, that's complicated. I'll look it up when I get home. Call me later at home and I'll tell you. And they walk away. I'm staring at him. Every kid in school knows you're not allowed to cook on Shabbos. Stirring a pot is an act of cooking. When you ladle soup out of a pot, you're stirring the pot. You're not allowed to stir the pot while it's on the fire, because now you're cooking. So you have to remove it from the fire. I said, every kid, why didn't you just tell her she was right? Now, I'm a brash teenager, right? He says, and make a wife look bad to her husband? Not allowed to do that. See, it blew me away how naturally, immediately, and instantaneously, he switched to the, that's a big, too complicated for me. The respect for the institution of marriage. Even somebody else's marriage, certainly your own. So if we had the respect for each other and the respect for the institution of marriage, we could have incredible lives. It's not over the moon. It's doable. We just have to get back to good old-fashioned appreciation and mindfulness. What is marriage? What is the person you are married to doing in your life? Not just in your apartment. You're not roommates. What are you? You're not lovers. Don't need marriage for that. So what are you? These are good questions. And just asking them already makes us better people. What?
I want to answer that. What is altruistic sex?
Altruistic sex is when you wish others altruistic sex, I think you mentioned it already. To be intimate means you melt a little bit. You dissolve your surface tension. Mm-hmm. You dissolve a little bit into each other. Like 2 drops of water,
right,
side by side. What's keeping them apart? Water is supposed to flow. Why are they sitting there like 2 bumps on a log? Because of surface tension, right? What will it take to break that tension? Almost nothing. Mm-hmm. Just breathe on it, right? A married couple, being intimate, are breaking the surface tension, at least for a moment. Dissolve a little bit, melt a little bit, surrender some of your surface tension.
It's a good word, the word surrender, because it is the one thing. People come to me with sexual problems, obviously, and part of that is their inability to surrender. So at the root of a lot of these issues is that inability to surrender.
I've seen the same thing, and it looks like they don't really believe they should. Nobody ever said surrender. They said get what you can. Get the most out of the relationship. So I think people just need to be told surrender is a good idea. Mm-hmm. Like being vulnerable is a good idea. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Stop being afraid of it. It's natural. Let go a little bit. And you will find yourself merged into this thing called marriage because you're both dissolving.
Yeah.
That is incredible bonding. And you will never feel alone again. You may feel angry, but you have someone to be angry at. You may miss your spouse, you have somebody to miss. And even, to get a little bit off the subject, even when a spouse passes away and the surviving spouse says, now I'm all alone. No, you're not. You're haunted. They haven't gone away. The spouse is still in your life, not in your space, but in your life. You're not alone. In fact, all you ever do is talk about your spouse.
I like that. Not in your space, but in your life. Yeah, it's good.
So the mystics were not living with their head in the clouds. They just saw life as being special. They were not ignorant of life. They just had a more beautiful vision of it, which turns out to be very practical. Mm-hmm. So you don't have to be a mystic or a Kabbalist.
Or a therapist.
Or a therapist. You know, you can just live your life without Kabbalah and without therapy. How's that for an idea? Not everyone has to be a Kabbalist. And not everyone has to go for therapy. It's when we're misinformed, when we don't know what we're doing. yeah, then we need intervention.
Yeah.
But why don't we know what we're doing? What happened to education? What happened to wisdom, learning? Why do we have to wait till we're dysfunctional in order to become functional? So we're both out of a job.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you're trying to talk everybody, ourselves out of a job. Yeah.
Yes. Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, it would be actually.